What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Zach and Pat Show. I'm Zach.
I'm Pat.
This is the show about manhood, fatherhood, entrepreneurship, and the mentality it takes to be successful at those things. And we'll probably sprinkle in some helpful real estate advice too, because that's what Pat and I do. You know, guys, life can be tough. We can go through some things and struggle at times, but this is the show to let you know that you're not alone. So if you're someone out there going through any of these things, this is the show for you.
All right, guys, let's talk about something we all need. High quality, comfortable, stylish clothing that actually holds up in real life. Whether you're grinding at work, hitting the gym, or just hanging out, the Normal brand has you covered. I've been rocking their gear, and let me tell you, it's not your average clothing line. They've nailed it perfect with the perfect blend of durability, comfort, style, whether it's a go-to rugged Henley, a hoodie, a button-down that doesn't make you feel like a stiff, the Normal brand is where it's at. The best part is you can support the show while upgrading your wardrobe. Just hit the link in the description below, check out their collection. Trust me, once you try it, you'll wonder why you didn't do it sooner. The Normal brand, made for real life, built to last. Now go check them out.
Shout out to our friends over at Captain Beard Co. Guys, if you are looking for beard care products, shampoo, conditioner, body wash, give Captain Beard Co. a try. They have this unbelievable beard butter, balm, oils, and then it smells amazing. Ladies, if you're looking for something for your men as a gift to help with their grooming, check them out. Also, if you guys are looking to just set the mood one night, candles, unbelievably smelling candles, made with all natural ingredients here locally to St. Louis. Give them a shot. Also, while you're there, use the promo code Zach and Pat for 10% off your purchase.
Hey there, guys. I really appreciate you checking out the Zach and Pat Show. If you can obviously tell, we are a newer podcast, but one way we're really trying to grow the show is trying to get up the amount of subscribers we have. So, you know, if you're watching the show and you're getting something out of it, we'd really appreciate it if you could click that subscribe button. That would help us out a ton. Please click that button. And now back to the show.
We have a very special guest in studio today. He is a retired police officer with the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department, the great and powerful Colin Ledbetter. Welcome to the show.
Welcome, sir. Excited to have you on.
It's a pleasure, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, man. Well, if you could just kind of tell people, a little bit about yourself and kind of get your story. Obviously, we'll dive much deeper into it, but for the people out there that don't know Colin, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess 2016, I joined the Illinois National Guard, the infantry. So I did that for about a year before I joined SLMPD. From there, when I joined SLMPD, I went to the 6th District and patrolled there for about, I guess, January 22 when I was shot. So with the Guard, I had one deployment overseas. It was actually just kind of a really fun tour of the Middle East. I sat on I was with the Navy for a little bit, sat on the ocean, and that was about it. So wasn't anything crazy there, but definitely the police department, I saw some things. So
yeah. So back in, you had something pretty crazy happen to you, a year and a half ago. So now?
It was January 26th of 2022.
Okay, so 3 years ago.
Yep. So we were. Actually, it was a crazy day. My partner, Nathan Speece, and I were patrolling. Actually, we weren't patrolling. I was actually downtown for an interviewing for a position with our drug unit within the department. And I had just gotten out of the interview, and I walked down to the car, and Nate looks at me, and he goes, "Hey, man, there's a car up on Riverview, wanted for a homicide from the night before." I said, "Cool, let's do it." It's our Friday, of course. So we drive all the way up there, and we end up seeing the car take off, pursue the car.
So when you guys saw it, when you guys pulled up, it just took off?
Yeah. So originally we pulled up there. We saw how many people were in it, and saw there was 4 people. We kind of flip back around. As we're flipping back around, it takes off. Well, we had already called a 3rd officer to meet us up there. As he's pulling up, the car almost hits him, so he kind of dodges and gets away from it, and we were able to all get out onto Riverview and kind of went straight into the county from that point. So if you're familiar with the city at all, there's a very thin neck all the way at the very north side where Riverview kind of runs all the way up to 270, and we were right at that neck where it starts to bottleneck off, and we went straight into the county. For a logistics standpoint, for policing, if you're all the way up there, there's no police with you. Like, you're done.
You're by yourself.
As soon as you start heading north, you're going into the county, and you hope that there's county officers around. Well, for most of the pursuit, there was no one. We pursued for, I think, 10, 15, I think it was actually 20 minutes. The car ended up wrecking out in Ferguson, and we had
Would it just like spun out, hit something?
so he had went up an embankment and tried to jump into like a Schnucks parking lot to I guess, I don't know, but he flattened all four
Trying
of his
some
tires.
Fast and Furious shit that
Yep.
didn't work in real life.
Yeah, and it kind of worked out. I mean, we were not going to get spike strips down on this thing, and I don't know if it would have ended, but obviously the pursuit was not going to get canceled. These guys were out to do some damage, and that actually became very evident here pretty quickly. So he drives up into the Schnucks parking lot, comes back down onto the road. We're on West Florissant at this point. It ends up wrecking out, spins out, and 4 guys get out. I end up chasing the driver. My partner's chasing the passenger.
And they all just kind of scattered, go different ways.
They did. The 2 guys that were in the back seats of the car ended up waiting. They were kind of smart. They waited, ended up running after we had already passed the car. So this third officer also follows Nate and I around the building. I don't have memory of this, so this is all, third-party info. But at some point, I hear gunshots. Nate is already chasing this guy. I hear Nate get shot, so I come back around to help Nate. The guy had gotten away from Nate, and the guy and I end up, as best the investigators think, we ran into each other and got tangled up. We ended up exchanging a couple gunshots. I got shot in my abdomen. The bullet traveled down and hit my femoral artery. If you know anything about that,
Shit.
I was pretty much toast. It shredded it completely, so I was just bleeding out. And I had tried to get away from the guy, so I kind of went around the corner of the building. And at that point, the third officer gets there and ends the threat, basically. So I am around this corner. I have no one in sight. I'm just sitting there bleeding out, basically. The other 2 officers don't even know I'm shot. And we just got lucky enough. 2 county officers had seen us chasing the car. They'd flipped around. They were in an undercover car. Hear the gunshots come back to us. They were chasing the 2 guys that got out of the back seat. They popped back to us. And I don't know, to this day, we've become really good friends with them. But to this day, I don't know what made him look my direction. But the guy's name's Husky. And he just happened to look over the fence, and he kind of see me waving at him. And so he thought I was good. So he jumps over to help Nate. He starts putting a tourniquet on Nate, and he goes, "Hey, where's the other guy?"
Shot?
He got shot in the right leg. It shattered his femur.
Oof.
And so he hops back over to the fence and is looking for me. Ends up finding me leaning up against I'm basically out at this point. I'm leaning up against the building, and they're able to get me out and get me. So happened an ambulance pulls up and gets me to the hospital, and it was just a whirlwind from there. Miracle after miracle, really. There just happened to be a vascular surgeon there that was able to repair the artery, and that actually saved my leg because they were going to amputate my leg. It was just one thing after another. So I definitely was blessed that day, but it was a long ride. I originally tried to go back to work. It took me, I was on and off my feet for a while, but I finally was able to kind of start making some forward progression.
So was there any damage? Like, obviously there had to have been damage to like your abdomen and everything. So the bullet went in through your stomach and exited your leg?
Yep. So I have a scar all the way up here, down to my abdomen. And, I've got another one that's probably about a foot long on my leg where they had to cut me open and stuff. I took, it was around 39 units of blood throughout my time there. Wow. It all wasn't right there. The average person only has about 8 units in their body, but they were putting blood into me as it was coming out. Yeah. So they just kept dumping it in. So I took a lot of blood, and then Nate took, I think, 10 that day. So, I mean,
wow,
Barnes,
too, you guys.
Yeah, Barnes was out of blood at that point. Yeah, it was a whirlwind. I tried going back to work for a long time. I think it was 2 years, 3 years. And then my neurologist finally set me down, and he said, "Hey, there's some deficits here that a normal police officer needs to be able to do reactionary time, memory, stuff like that. And he said, we can keep going down this path, but I don't know how long, it's just not going to happen, basically. So at that point I was kind of like, I had to take a step back and was like, had to reevaluate my life. And I was like, well, what can I do now? So it definitely was a culture shock. It really rocked my life, obviously. My partner, Nate, he returned to the department, and you guys may or may not know this.
Did he just recently get struck by a car?
He did. So he was the one that was struck on the interstate by a car. He lost his good leg below the knee. So now he has a rod in his, I think, and I could be getting this wrong, but I think his left leg has the rod and his right leg is missing now. So it's below the knee. But the dude, I mean, he's my hero. So he's always said that I'm his hero, but he's just a freaking beast. I mean, to go back to work after being shot, after dealing with mine, there was so much trauma with me as well. And then to have this happen, and he's
2 years later.
Jeez.
And he's going to, I just saw him at a baseball game the other night, and he's just, I mean, he's back on his feet. He's walking around on crutches with no leg. I mean, it's wild, but he's my hero. So yeah.
Now, you mentioned, this. You were saying this is like what you've been told, and do you not have any personal recollection of what was going on or what happened or like what you were feeling or emotionally or anything like that?
I have nothing. From all the blood loss and the brain injury and stuff like that, I lost for whatever reason, whether it's God or whoever, but someone decided I didn't need that memory. And
right. I was going to say that's probably a good thing that you don't have that.
Yeah. It is and it isn't. Like, I struggle with it. Like, I wonder what happened. And I think that it definitely would have been an integral part if I decided to go back to the department. Like, I would have needed to know, like, something. Hey, did I screw this up or what did I do? But I've kind of made peace with it now. And like, I know that it is probably better that I don't know what happened.
Yeah, because I couldn't imagine what it would be like just sitting there with your thoughts, knowing that you're bleeding out and like alone. Like, man,
it's I've seen my face. So the county officers, when they came up, I saw their body camera. So I've kind of seen that, and it's kind of weird. It's like watching a movie and you're like, the outcome and it was you, but you're like on the edge of your seat.
Yeah.
No, it's real weird, but I have seen all that, and you could definitely see the real world, frightened look in my face of, hey,
I'm about to die. Yeah.
Yep. I definitely knew it was coming. And then I think shortly after, I did die. I don't know how long I was without a heartbeat. I think it was, 8 to 10 minutes, however long it took to get to the hospital, basically. So
it was on transport that they said that you were.
So right there and then when they found me, they checked for a pulse. They didn't find one. It could have been just the height, and they, couldn't find one, but they did get me into the ambulance, and EMTs did check me out. I did not have a pulse. They started CPR right away. So they were conducting CPR for about 15 minutes on the way to the hospital. So however long that is,
Yeah. Man.
Crazy, man. That is.
I mean, like, how do they go in and repair an artery like that though? Because that's the big one.
You said they shredded it. So
it's so they took it. It's kind of wild to hear. But once I got to the hospital, they opened up my chest and they immediately started massaging my heart. And from my understanding, they started marking out my leg. They're like, hey, this is where we're going to amputate. We're going to be done with it. And for whatever reason, there was a vascular surgeon that was getting ready to perform a procedure upstairs. And they called him. They're like, hey, would you come down here and take a look at this? So he comes down and he's like, oh, yeah. He's like, we could definitely do something with this. So he ends up putting a bovine stent from, I think it's probably about 8 inches, I think. But it starts up here and then it goes down into my leg. And he was able, they're up here massaging my heart, doing all this trauma stuff. And he's down here like fine tuning a artery, which is just wild.
That's crazy.
Basically connects, like takes out the broken piece and puts something else in there to connect it. Wow.
Yep.
That's insane, dude.
Yeah.
That is wild. Like, how is this like, I mean, obviously this has changed your life, but like how different is life now? Like mentally, physically, everything.
There's like, I would say my biggest issue right now is my leg. There's that stent in there isn't meant to be permanent. So eventually at some point it's going to have to be replaced. And I do get pains and I can't walk as far. I can't do what I used to do. Not that I was expecting that, but it's that part of it's hard. And then mentally, I still have trouble sleeping every once in a while. You get, I think, probably memories coming back from the shooting and stuff. Normal stuff. I do, and this is something I preach to the guys at the department now, is mental health. I think that's the number one killer of anyone in our line of work is mental health. I see guys all the time, I think, killing themselves and just stuff like that. It's the number one killer. You can give a cop all these tools to be able to survive on the streets, but then at the end of the day, we get no tools to survive at home, and that's the biggest killer. So I've been really on point with my mental health and hopefully reaching out and getting more people involved in the first responder area.
What are some things that you do for your mental health, or what are some tips that when you're talking to these police officers, because a lot of the show that we talk about it has to deal with mental health. I think it's a major topic that needs to be discussed. And so what are some tips? What are some things that you do, and what are some tips that you are giving to these police officers when you're talking to them?
I've noticed a lot of police officers, including myself, we're not only reactionary, but in the moment, you can kind of see that there's a disconnect sometimes if they've been through a traumatic event. You can see it in their eyes, a loud bang, whatever it may be. I've noticed what helps with me is simply distracting myself somehow. What I do is I either do this with my fingers until I can feel my breathing reset. I trace my fingers sometimes, and it looks real weird probably to the regular person, but it's literally just taking my mind off of that moment and focusing on one thing. That's kind of what I've told everyone, is they need to find that where they can remove themselves from the situation and calm themselves down.
I guess my question to that would be, do you think that's just kicking the can down the road for that same thing to come back, or is that something that you think actually will help? Eventually they're gonna have to sit with these thoughts, these feelings, and because not nearly going through the traumatic things that you guys have gone through, but there's things in my life that I've gone through that have put that have been a mental strain, and it's really just sitting with those emotions and those feelings and just feeling those things. And trying to understand where they're coming from and why, so I can process through it and move on.
Right.
That's just would be a concern of mine, is like, hey, yeah, this is perfect for now, but then do you go back and kind of sit with that?
Yeah. So, no, that's a great point. So that is mostly just to get you through that moment.
Gotcha.
There's a thing that I have done that I recommend to everyone, is called EMDR therapy. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. But basically there's a couple different variations of it. The variation that I've always done, is where you have headphones just like this, and you'll sit there and it'll play like noise or whatever. You close your eyes and it'll take you to this, you imagine that you're at my area. It's like your safe space kind of thing. But my area is on a mountaintop in Colorado. I was fishing, just something peaceful that I have. It's a memory that I have, and I will use it to calm myself down, but I also talk through that with a therapist, whoever, while all this is going on. She'll start bringing up things like my shooting, or a lot of my trauma is from the hospital, me sitting in the hospital trying to figure out what happened. So we talk about that. We talk about that kind of stuff. So definitely walking through that with someone is definitely a vital point of the progression. They can't keep shoving the stuff down. It has to be talked about. It has to be discussed and processed.
When you hear about PTSD, I feel like you're always thinking, most people naturally think like military veterans, like not a lot of people think like police officers, but I could be wrong on this, but it's like, I feel like police officers, every single day they're coming across interactions with people that could mean life or death. And people forget that, police officers are just people too. They have families to go home to. They have, every time you pull someone over, you don't know like who's in the back, like the window's tinted. I don't know what I'm going to do when I walk up to this car. Are they going to be friendly? Or are they going to, just start shooting? Like you never know. And it's just it's terrifying. It's just something that people I feel like don't think about when they think of PTSD. But I mean, I think there's probably a ton of cops out there that have it and they're just living through it, and they're just still clocking in every day and doing the thing.
It's just a recipe for an explosion down the road. Like
that's a great point. It's kind of weird, but I find myself at my therapy sessions a lot of times not talking about my shooting or anything else traumatic. I talk about dead bodies. I talk about telling a mother that her son was killed. That kind of stuff is the stuff that needs to be talked about. It's the everyday buildup of traumatic events, and especially in the city, it wouldn't be crazy for me to go to 2-3 shooting scenes a day.
Jeez.
In the summer it gets so violent, and it's definitely come down a little bit, but the height of 2019, 2020, it was bad. And we were seeing, it's not normal for humans to see dead bodies every day.
Yeah.
It's just not a normal thing. And it's definitely, and even the small town cops, it needs to be talked about. I remember one of the earlier times that I kind of realized that I needed to talk to someone. And mind you, I did not talk to anyone my whole policing career until after I was shot. But I
mean, talk to someone like a therapist.
To a therapist, yep. But one of the things that I find myself talking about sometimes with my therapist is I think I had a month and a half on, and it was the middle of summer, and I had walked into a house because it reeked like someone was dead in there. We ended up finding a guy that was he was pretty far gone, and it was the middle of summer, so he was pretty ripe.
Oh man.
And we looked through the rest of the house. Thank God we did. We found his mentally deranged brother in the bed. He'd been living on sour milk and, just random spoiling things in the fridge. The guy had been dead for a week and a half.
And I think I might have heard, was it the brother that killed him?
No. His brother, he ended up just having a heart attack.
Oh, gotcha.
But his brother lived with them, and all the other family members lived out of state.
Gotcha.
But they kind of like, hey, we haven't heard from them in a while. They were pretty self-sufficient with the brother.
Sure.
But it was, that's one of the things that I find myself talking about a lot, because it was just so abnormal,
and the sensories around it. The smell, just everything. I couldn't imagine.
Yeah.
What that smell was like.
I feel like smell is like one of those things that like really brings memories back.
For sure.
Like I'll smell, like I can't remember what was something the other day. I smelled something. It's like, it was my kid was playing with Play-Doh, and I was like smelling it, and I was like, man, this just like reminds me of childhood, like playing like that Play-Doh smell.
Smell is definitely
just like brings it back. There's something about that sense above the other ones. I think that like really, at least for me, brings back memories.
Yep.
It's funny you say that. When I got home that night, I had made pork chops on the grill, and for whatever reason, I still had that smell in my mind, and I related that to pork chops. It's hard for me to eat pork chops now. It's just weird. You relate that stuff, and you're exactly right.
You just remember it. Yeah. Smell that raw pork smell, and you're like, oh, I could totally.
It's very weird, but it does. And smell is definitely something that I bring with me a lot, is from incidents and stuff. So
imagine. Yeah. Now going back to the therapy and that sort of stuff, we've had a guest on here before, who had some pretty traumatic stuff, and he got into ayahuasca and doing ayahuasca trips and things like that. And he talks about
Ibogaine would be another one.
And
he didn't do that, but
how he takes veterans on these trips to help them, because it's basically they go in and they do these they drink the ayahuasca, they go through this weekend long journey, and when these people come out, they feel like they're completely healed. Is that something that you've looked into or considered? Or
this is actually the first time I'm hearing it, so it's kind of neat to hear about that. But I'm always looking at different ways, to do that kind of stuff, and that's definitely something I'd look at.
Yeah, I know
is it Peru or Costa Rica?
A lot of places in South America they do the ayahuasca, but I think I've heard mostly that like a lot of veterans and people with severe PTSD, they do a different psychedelic called Ibogaine, and it's a very, from my understanding, it's definitely not one you want to ever you would never do it recreationally.
No,
but it's like apparently it has a like 80% success rate with PTSD and people with like severe addictions, like people that are like addicted to heroin, alcohol, all these, like they'll do this and they have like an 80% success rate afterwards for like at least maybe I don't know about the PTSD specifically, but I know for addiction, I think it's like an 80% success rate that they don't go back to the drugs,
Really?
which is like a crazy thing. And I know they're trying to like legalize it here. Like,
what was the
medically.
Joe Rogan episode? Who's that guy?
Yeah,
that
the
was
guy
on there?
from Texas.
Yes.
He's like,
I think I know.
yeah, it's they go into like a 3-hour conversation about it, but it would be I feel like that could be a game changer for police officers, veterans, addicts, all these. I mean, I think it's just something that isn't being utilized right now, but it clearly has some profound effects. So
all the people that I've talked to that have done it said that it's changed their lives, like the way they just view life, their life, everything that they've been through. But yeah, no, it's just something that I was thinking about and was curious if that was something that you had looked into or considered. But
Definitely check that out.
yeah. Wow.
So, I mean, yeah, you've had many chapters in your life: soldier, officer, survivor, now entrepreneur with your podcast. And which identity do you resonate with most now?
That's kind of a rough one. I definitely still feel the soldier, the police officer. I still walk into places and act like that and do that. But I'm definitely finding my new identity, working in the car industry. But also with this podcast thing, it's really brought out a whole nother side of me I would have never thought. You can ask anyone that knew me before. I would have never done something like this or anything like that. I was always the quiet one, sit in the corner, even at Christmas events with family members. Just not my cup of tea, I guess. But it's really brought a new passion in me to help, first responders, help do this stuff, especially after this whole thing with Nate. It's brought a whole new light to my life, good or bad, a little bit of both, I guess, but it's definitely invigorating, I guess, Now,
do you guys get asked to go on, like, from other police forces to come up and, like, talk and share your experience and kind of continue on that mental health? Like, I feel like that would be a very big, you said you still have that mindset, but you also want to help. Like, I mean, I'm sure that would be a huge benefit.
It's something that I've reached out to departments for. Departments are kind of closed off-ish with that kind of stuff. I don't know what the dynamic is. It just depends. I've definitely there's a couple new programs that the departments have started doing, like CIT training, crisis intervention training, but it kind of goes hand in hand with officer wellness and stuff like that too. So I have definitely reached out to a couple of those places, and I definitely want to do some talking and stuff like that, but I haven't reached that point yet.
Yeah, we had another police officer on here, and more so talking about like the hand-to-hand combat type training and how kind of limited that is. But I mean, do you feel like, now that you're out of being in the police, do you feel like that's kind of like the way things are structured, it's kind of archaic? They haven't really moved in to the 21st century in terms of like the training, not just physically, but mentally and things like that. Do you feel like it's still kind of archaic in that sense?
Yes, across the board. I think that there is strides to make it better. Definitely, even whenever I started, mental health wise, training wise, stuff like that. But I feel like every time we take 10 steps forward, we take 2 steps back. It just never fails. Right now, St. Louis City, they don't have a working gun range. We're borrowing one from the county. And a lot of the times they're going down there and they're doing dry firing. They're not even firing live rounds.
Well, I always remember driving up 55 because there's that just on the outer road or like out past the highway. There was that big concrete wall embankment. And everybody's like, yeah, that's the shooting range for the police department.
Yep.
So that's no longer.
Nope. They were failing to keep up with federal mandate for it. And it was actually becoming a danger. And that obviously where that is, when you fire, you're firing towards the road.
Right.
And now there was blockades whenever it was fully functional and all that to keep bullets from, in the range. But now it's not that way.
Okay.
And so they've shut it down. And I don't know, and this is from a month ago, but I'm sure it's still the same way. But they do not have a working gun range right now.
Man,
that's crazy. And especially police versus county, the the city versus the county. The city's the one that needs the the range for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of wild to me that
more gunfire.
Our leadership took that as a necessary evil. Like, oh, yep, we're gonna let the range, fall off and not keep up on it. It's one of those things. You have a house, and if you do regular maintenance on it,
You're fine.
Yeah,
you're fine. But whenever you let it fall down that far, now you're a lot of money in the hole.
It's just crazy that they leave it all. It basically sounds like it's all on you to do your training. Like we're not going to pay you to train, or that was something we talked about with Matt. That he's like, man, I think 25% of the time we should be spent training. Physically. Whether we're doing wrestling, grappling, jiu-jitsu, hand-to-hand combat stuff, or gun training, or
Absolutely.
fitness, or just general levels of fitness. And and it's just crazy that it's on your own, on your off time. You gotta be ready to go out here and potentially get in a life or death situation.
Especially like an 18-year-old kid coming out of high school that's going through the academy with really not a lot of life experience, thrown into a situation like that. Like, no, good luck.
Yeah, there's none of that happening. I mean, there is, but there isn't. There's just not enough of it, is what it is. Even like the talking standpoints, like a lot of officers, especially younger officers, need that talking, being able to talk. I mean, you can fight a battle just by talking someone down.
Sure.
9 times out of 10. Now, obviously, that last part, you're going to have to be able to fight. But, the other 9 times, you could probably talk someone down off a cliff, or, I've done that before. And that part, I feel like, is also lacking. The ability to come into a situation and figure out, engage, and all of that. And that's an imperative part of policing, is being able to step into a situation and take all of the positive, negatives, and then be able to come out of it without having to fire your weapon.
Sure. Well, let's get into that a little bit. Is there one that sticks out to you, or a time that you kind of had to use, you used, verbal judo to?
Yeah, absolutely. It popped right up in my head, but it was probably 2019, in December. It's cold, it's snowing, all of this. And there was a call it was in the Walnut Park neighborhood. There was a call for a man on top of a roof, who was on drugs. So I was kind of letting the call play out because it was someone else's call, and people kept showing up. And I'm like, well, let's go check it out. So we show up, we check it out. I recognize the guy immediately.
Frequent flyer.
Well, I had told him when I was a rookie, I had told him that his brother had just been shot and killed. For whatever reason, he remembered me. I was kind of on the ground at this point. I was kind of yelling up at him. And
how many stories up was it?
It was just like on top of a house. It was enough where
it was like, yeah,
if he falls off, he's going to break a leg or arm or something.
Probably not.
But
yeah.
He was very, he had a knife at one point. It was a lot of unknowns, and no one was going to get up on an icy roof and fight him either.
Yeah. No thanks.
So I get up on the back of the roof and I start talking to this guy, and he's like, I tell him my name. He's like, Ledbetter? Oh, I remember you. And he just instantly right there. So I just played with that. And eventually, I have video of it, but we eventually went up with the fire department on their ladder, and I grabbed the guy and we ended up getting him off the roof. But that kind of stuff, like that would not have happened that way if I had made that connection and talked to him. It probably would have been someone having to go up there and fight him on a roof.
And do they give you any sort of training in communicating and things like that?
Yes and no. I mean, the closest training that I can relate to that is when you're at the end of your academy stage. And obviously this is the academy in 2018. I don't know how it is now. But you do certain, they call it like practical assessments. So officers from the districts will come down and, play with their recruits. It's almost kind of a fun thing for the officers to go down there and like act like crazy people and try to get these kids to talk you down, basically.
Wow.
And that's really the only time like that I can remember in my policing career that I did anything like that besides the real world,
How do you think, is this more of a leadership thing in terms of like, hey, we still have that old guard in there, that's that old mentality of things that's not really wanting to make the switch? Or is it just they just don't, just as a whole, they just don't want to do anything?
110% leadership. I think it's across the board though. I don't think it's just in the city. I think it's, every police department doesn't have that person that will finally just say, all right, enough's enough. Let's get this done.
Yeah.
You know, this is what we need to make a good police department. Let's do it. Let's make the strides. So.
What do you think another aspect to that too is the funding side of things?
I think funding is definitely a big part. I think the city might see some differences now with the state control. I know that we had more of that stuff when more training availabilities when the state was under control back in,
What
I
do
think
you mean
it was
the state. There was a change.
Yep. So in 2014, the state had control of the city's police department.
Okay.
They had for the entirety. In 2014, a bill passed from the city to take back over control. So that's been the decline of the St. Louis City Police Department. And then the beginning of this year, the state took back over control. But we definitely saw a decline in vehicle maintenance, area maintenance, stuff like that. There was definitely a decline in, weapons and stuff like that also. Obviously, our gun range. All of that stuff kind of suffered while we were under the city.
Yeah, I had a buddy, one of my really good friends, St. Louis Metro PD, and he was telling me, he was in the 2nd precinct, but he was telling me how his SUV, there was a hole, it rotted out the floors. Like he was literally driving an SUV with a hole in the bottom of the bottom of it.
There's one of those in every district, or there was whenever I worked there. We had one, 881 was the car number. And
the seats, he said all the padding, and basically you're just sitting on straight metal bars because the padding's all been worn out. Like
Yep.
Yeah.
It's insane, man.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of times it's putting Band-Aids on bigger issues. And hopefully, and like I said, hopefully with state control, we'll see the strides to make that stuff better.
Now, what ultimately led to them? I mean, obviously, just the general decline of everything that led the state to take it back over again.
Yeah, I think that there was a lot of people reaching out to, leadership in the state and saying, hey, listen, like this is happening,
Right.
sending them pictures of cars with holes in them, and saying, hey, we need to fix this. So
It's incredible. Like, I know you got your good and your bad in every situation and all that, but like I would say for the majority of the police force, they're there to do good. They're there to help.
Absolutely.
And when you're not given the resources to do that, then people, here's what we have left to deal with. Like, this is what we have to work with. So what do you expect?
Absolutely. You definitely see a decline in utilities, but then also the lack of funding and the lack of pay and stuff like that is going to drive good officers away.
Right.
And then what are you left with? People trying to get a minimum wage job in a police department.
Right. That's a big ask for you to go put your life on the line for minimum wage.
Yeah.
Everybody that I knew that was in Metro is now out working county or some
municipality.
Yeah, some specific municipality.
And probably 110% happier.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I know of several. I can think, I think the guy we were talking about before the show, I know he works for Kirkwood now. I know he got out a year or two ago, and, I think he's making more money and seems to be a lot happier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
His life isn't being threatened every day.
Yeah.
The one that I was telling about that was telling me about the holes in the cars and all that stuff. He was like, he moved to Paris, so now he's firefighter, EMT, and police.
Yep.
So he does all three.
Oh, really?
Yep.
That's what they do?
That's
Yeah,
how
dude, Paris Wild. Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy.
He'll do
so
a
is it
shift.
just like a shift thing?
Yeah. He'll do a shift as a police officer, shift as EMT, shift as firefighter.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's
kind of
definitely, they've got a
different way to
good
do it.
thing going. I mean, if you think about it like that at any point in time, you could be any one of those, like if they show up on a medical call and they need to arrest someone, I mean, that's there.
They can do
They
it.
can
Yeah,
do it,
they
yeah.
can do everything. Yeah, that's. I mean, or they show up and there's a shooting. You probably don't see a lot of shootouts in Depair, but
Right.
He's mentioned the mall a few times that it's gotten bad.
Yep. Some of that,
Especially since all the other malls have been shutting down.
well, you see a lot of that county stuff, now and I would definitely say it's the city trickling out into this county stuff and making it not what it should be.
yeah.
Well, do you feel like you're more comfortable speaking about this now because you're not in it? Is this something that you would have ever spoken about while you were in it?
Oh, no,
Yeah.
no, absolutely. I definitely am more comfortable now speaking about it than whenever I was trying to get my pension or,
Right.
working for the police department. I would have never said anything.
Which
Yeah.
is sad that that's kind of how things are. Like, people, like, I feel like if more people came together and spoke up, it might be a different subject, but I'm sure they're putting threats on you to stay quiet, which sucks.
Yeah, were you getting any threats from higher ups or
I got
feedback and
when I started my podcast, we've dug into some situations, and I've got some text messages from chain of command like, hey, you need to watch your step. People aren't going to like this. And I'm like, you know what? If they don't like it, they don't like it.
Right.
That's on them.
I don't work for you anymore.
Yep.
Right. Not doing anything illegal.
Yep. So I think raising awareness is only going to help the rank and file of the police department. If people don't know about it, then what can people do?
Yeah. Well, maybe it'll encourage more people to kind of step up and speak out on it.
Absolutely.
Obviously they are, if they're reaching out to the state to kind of get them involved.
Yeah, I definitely, I don't know that for a fact, but I definitely think that's what happened. I don't know why else, but I definitely think, I know that there was a few people going around taking pictures of cars like, hey, this is pathetic.
That's pretty bad.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Colin, you've been through some crazy shit, dude. What is there a philosophy or belief system that's like kind of helped you anchor through all these extremes?
Yeah, definitely. So my podcast name is Built Different. And when
Go check it out. Go hit subscribe.
Yes.
That's good.
When Nate and I were shot, I think it was, 2-3 days into it, my sergeant was like talking about it. And one of the officers was like, yeah, they really are, they're built different. And I've kind of led by that philosophy of not only am I, but, all the guys that I worked with, it takes a different breed to go out on these streets and do it. And actually there's a motto on our patrol station out in front that says home of the real police for District 5 and 6. And it's definitely stuck with me. And I take that kind of with me every day is I used to be that guy and I'm still that guy. So I kind of just always keep that in the back of my head. Like, even if I'm having a bad day at work now or something like that, definitely not as bad as what it used to be. I can definitely have bad days, but not as bad as when I was a police officer. But I just keep that in the back of my head, like, hey, I used to do this. I used to be a real life badass. Like, and that's the way I see all the officers that are still going out there and doing it every day. They may not say that. They may be too humble to say that, but they are.
Yeah. Well, when you're in there and you're facing these crazy, crazy situations, what's that internal dialogue like as you're approaching like the unknown?
Mm-hmm.
Like what is that? What are you saying to yourself? What are you thinking in those moments?
I think it's a little bit of everything. There's a little bit of fear, a little bit of anxiety, and a little bit of adrenaline. And I think those three match perfectly to make, the perfect person to walk through that door. If you don't have fear walking through a door, searching a house or something like that, then you're doing it wrong. If you're walking in there thinking, oh, I'm invincible and I'm going to be all right, or you're chasing a homicide car, you're like, oh yeah, this is fun. You definitely have the wrong mindset. And I don't believe that any of those officers would, it's definitely a perfect mixture of adrenaline and fear. Definitely.
Any part of that life that you miss?
Yeah, definitely. The camaraderie. I was really, really close with my squad. And I'm still am, but I miss being able to hop into a patrol car and work with someone and trust them with my life. Definitely.
Yeah, we one of the other members that we had on here, Jason, he's just started his podcast up. He's a business coach and stuff like that, and he was talking about. It was a big mental health episode because that's what he focuses on. And he was just he's like, yeah, a lot of the issues that we're seeing with police officers, firefighters, veterans, and is that they had that team philosophy. They missed they missed that camaraderie that you just mentioned, and that's one of the biggest things. And I've seen it on the baseball side of it. I know as a baseball player, our life's not nearly as stressful,
right?
The shit that we're going through, but it's a big deal to a lot of these, especially these kids coming out of high school, and you hear. Like their whole identity is tied to this, and the biggest thing is just having that camaraderie, that team behind them or with them, and going through the same shit. We talk about it all the time with jiu-jitsu. Like some of your best friends and the people that you're with are the ones that you're doing the hard shit with, and that completely makes sense on why that would be something you miss. But how have you built that outside of that? How have you built your team around that since getting out?
Yeah, definitely. So. I still keep in contact with my old squad, but I'm also expanding, I guess, my team. There's so many guys that I know in the department now that know me. So I'm always trying to reach out and be that helpful voice and step in and say, hey, if you need some help, I'm here, type of thing. And it's definitely become a passion of mine, and I've grown my friend group immensely.
That's awesome.
Within the first responder crowd, not only police officers, but firefighters and EMS and all of those. So it's definitely it's kind of becoming a bigger family of mine, you know.
Have you tied in with like the Hero Network or any of that sort of stuff in terms of like helping there?
I haven't really. I've kind of become, you know, I've definitely become a big advocate for the Red Cross. I do a lot of events with them, and then the Backstoppers, I try to help them out anything I can like that. But I haven't really reached out to the Hero Network or anything like that yet. But yeah,
well, the president's a member here, so
right.
Yep.
Yeah, I've met him a few times.
Ed and Charlie, man, those guys are great. So.
And so, you know, is there something you learned in crisis negotiation that actually helps, you know, kind of what you're doing now?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like, you know, it's not as serious, but you got to tell a customer, you know, hey, your bill for your car is you need a transmission.
Yeah.
You know, it's not an easy thing to hear. So definitely knowing how to present that and seeing different people come through the dealership and presenting it differently and how I present it it's all about tone of voice, you know, saying things that need to be said, but saying them in a way that the customer is going to understand and follow up with. And definitely I feel like I've brought that over from crisis, you know, negotiation and stuff.
And what's the car dealership that you work for?
Hosick Motors in Vandalia.
Okay.
Yep.
And you've been doing that for how long now?
Since January of last year.
Okay.
Oh, cool.
And how's that change of pace for you?
Completely different. You know, it's definitely a different ride. I actually just took the parts manager position yesterday.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. It took me a couple months, you know, to really ease in, because, you know, I had 3 years off the department. But then I'm also trying to figure out how not to be a cop anymore, not to be a soldier anymore, you know, so I'm like easing into it, you know, and figuring it out. But definitely, I've definitely hit full stride now and figuring it out. So, definitely a different pace, but, it's good. I like it. You know, it's something different. And, you know, I feel great. I wake up early every day, get to work, and it just feels good to have a drive again.
So you're not on the sales side, but you're on the repair, like automotive repair
Parts,
side.
Yep.
Okay.
Going back to when you were shot, what was the recovery like? Like how are you bedridden for like 6 months, or like how did that?
Yeah, I was in a coma for two-ish weeks, I think. My overall hospital stay was like a month and some change, you know, a couple days. Most of that was spent in Barnes. They moved me to Tristle, which is like a rehab facility. So I was there for about a week before I went home and did all that. But I did a lot of, you know, outpatient therapy, stuff like that, learning how to
like relearn how to walk.
When I was in the hospital, yes, there's a lot of video and stuff of me, you know, walking with a walker, trying to stand up and stuff like that. So definitely, yeah.
Because it doesn't take long for your muscles to start atrophying. And
It's
if
crazy.
you're in a coma for 2 weeks, coming out of that, like even that long.
That was crazy. You know, even a year, I think down the road, like my muscles still weren't cooperating with me right, you know, and that it only took that, you know, 2-3 weeks. Yeah, sitting in a bed.
It's crazy. Yeah, I had knee surgery, you know, 3 years ago, and it's just like watching my leg disappear was like crazy. I'd look at my left leg and it looked normal, and I look at my right leg and it's like half the size. I'm like, whoa, this happened in like 3 weeks. Like, what the hell?
Yep,
crazy. I spent my whole life working out, and all of a sudden it just goes away in 3 weeks. It's crazy what the body does.
Yeah.
Well, do you do any sort of like physical training or sports or anything like that?
Not at the moment. You know, I still try to get outside. My wife and I walk every night and stuff like that. It's just not something that's in the card for me right now with my leg. I'm still struggling a lot with that and stuff. I do go to the gym. You know, I try to do upper body stuff, but I'm limited with my leg. My leg just
doesn't cooperate.
Did you play any sports growing up?
I did. So I actually played soccer, baseball, and basketball.
Okay.
Played a little bit of soccer in college.
Where at?
Greenville University.
Yeah.
Yep. So did that for, I think, just my first year, my freshman year, and then ended up joining the military like right after that. So,
gotcha.
Yeah.
Let's talk about a little bit about military life. What was military life like?
It was a whirlwind. You know, in the National Guard, it's part time. You know, it's 2 weeks, and it's 2 weeks a month, it's 1 week in a month, 2 weeks in the summer. And they that's what they tell you. That's their recruiting pitch. Mine was more like, I don't know, 2 months, a year, and then, a weekend, a month. So it was a lot, balancing work and then balancing the military was, it was wild. Trying to keep all that stuff straight. And then whenever I became a sergeant, I had 4 guys to look after, and it was like keeping track of those 4 guys, but then also, and 4 guys that are borderline alcoholics, living in the real world, and then keeping track of those 4 guys, but then also figuring out how to stay, an active police officer was crazy. There was a lot on my plate.
So you're doing both at the same time?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
And
do you think some of the stuff that you learned in the military helped with your police career?
Oh, 110%. And it was always
you probably got more training doing that.
Yeah, and like a lot of the guys that I worked with at the department were all prior military, so I had no reservation, going through doors with these guys. It was just kind of natural.
Do you think that might be some sort of prerequisite for police forces moving forward? Like, hey, you know what? We would prefer if you had a military background coming into this.
I definitely think that there should be some sort of, if a department could afford it, some sort of pay raise or something, especially for the city. I mean, come on, like you're stepping out the gate. I remember my first week, I'm seeing dead bodies and shooting scenes like every day, and like definitely should be something to account for.
Every day.
Yeah, when I came out, I was like 2018. And Monday and Tuesday were slow. Wednesday was even slow, but Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, all the time, shootings, stuff like that.
Man,
robberies, anything. You were bound to get something big in one night of work.
It's so crazy because that's not that far from where we are right now, and just the average person, we don't hear about a lot. I mean, we hear about like the really crazy ones.
We hear how St. Louis is the most dangerous city in America.
But we don't like hear the specific stories or whatever. Yeah. But like to realize that it's going on that often. Like there's shootings and people getting killed. Yeah. Almost daily. Like it's just fucking 15 miles from where we're at right now.
Yeah.
And going back to my buddy that worked there, that moved out of there. He was telling me he's like, we've got more important things to deal with. So like there's certain calls that because we were so short staffed back then, that nobody would show up to because they wouldn't be worth the time because we're having to deal with homicides and things like that. And he's like, if you're speeding, fuck it. We don't give a shit because we can't, it's a rule that we can't even chase you if you're going above, what is it? Something, it was like 65 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Like they weren't allowed to chase him. So like, he's like, he just told me, if you're ever in the city, just take off going like 65 miles an hour and you'll be fine because they'll leave you alone.
There is a division of the city that they hired for, it's just a civilian position, but it's called TRU. Basically, if you call 911 and you're like, hey, I was at Busch Stadium and all of my property was stolen out of my car, you talk to a person on the phone, they take the report there.
Really?
That kind of stuff because it's so busy. So they take a lot of reports over the phone, and 9 times out of 10, it doesn't get solved.
Yeah, I mean, I've had my car broken into a few times. It's a lost cause.
Yep.
It's like, okay, well, I guess those sunglasses are gone.
Yep. It's a necessary evil,
sure,
I guess.
I mean, you got bigger fish to fry for sure.
And they definitely, I don't know if that will ever, subside with more money, more officers. I would like to think that it would, but I just don't know. But I mean, obviously, these people now aren't going to stop. So unless they stay in jail, they're going to move somewhere else.
Well, that's another problem too. Is for a while there, the AG was just letting they go in and be like, all right, yeah, see ya, and let them off,
letting violent criminals back out on the street.
Yep. So during COVID, it was basically catch and release for anything that was not a Part 1 crime.
What's Part 1 mean?
So you got your, murder, assault first, which is like shooting someone or shooting at someone. Robbery first. So you have to rob someone with a gun.
That's robbery first. Robbery second.
So armed robbery.
Robbery second is just forcibly removing items from a person.
Okay, so like I pickpocket you or whatever.
Well, you would have to like punch them or something like that. Yep, it's an added offense. Yep. So those types of crimes were sometimes getting issued, and then they were keeping them in jail sometimes.
But everything else, you're out.
Yep. So they did what was called a pending application of warrant. So you would have a certain amount of time to submit this to the circuit attorneys, but they would basically book them into jail. And I don't know, I was gone. I was on a deployment for a lot of this, so I don't know how it all went down, but I've heard stories, and they would take them down to the jail, and then once they got to the jail, they would be released, and then you would have a certain amount of time to apply the circuit attorney's office to get those charges issued. But then at that point, there would be a warrant issued for this person. So now you got to go find this person again and lock them up. And then more than likely the next day, the judge is going to grant him bail and he'll be released again, only to be picked back up on the warrant later on again. Yeah. So you're doing the job 3-4 times in a row. But it doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
No, not at all.
Not at all. God, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So you mentioned being on deployment. So you said you were on the with the Navy, deployed on a ship. Where at? Can you talk about that?
So yeah. So it was I wasn't on a ship. So when we originally went, we were slotted to go to Afghanistan to Fort Dwyer. And around that time, Trump signed a peace treaty deal. This is still when he was in office the first time. And he signed the peace treaty, and we were in Texas getting ready to go overseas. And it came down with, like, overnight. They were like, hey, we're not sending any more troops into Afghanistan. We're done. And we're like, oh, okay, cool. So we're going home. And they're like, nope, you're going to Kuwait. So they set us in Kuwait in these transient tents for probably, I don't know, I think we were there for 2-3 months, probably. Oh, wow. And it's like 40-man tents. So you're sleeping, this is your buddy right here. And it was fun. We just worked out the whole time. It was hot, but they moved us. They finally found us a job with the Navy. They needed some more security personnel on a naval base. So they moved us over there. We were there for about 2-3 months. It was kind of cool getting to work with the Navy and stuff like that. I actually got to drive around in a truck for a while and, do stuff like that. Nothing serious at all. There was a pad site that had missiles on it that we were protecting as well. But it was ultimately, we just worked out, ate good food, and that was pretty much it. Well,
lived in the Middle East.
Yeah. Bahrain was kind of the worst of it because we were right on the edge of the ocean. The Bahrainians did not like the Americans being there, so they dumped all of their fecal matter and stuff into the ocean right there where we were at.
Oh, jeez.
And we're talking about 110-degree heat. That's minus the humidity, so we haven't even hit humidity temperatures yet.
God.
So you'd have your AC cranked all the way down. You'd walk out with sunglasses on, and instantly you couldn't see.
Yeah,
just crazy. But then after that, we moved over to Jordan to meet up with the rest of our battalion, and sat there in Jordan for probably about a month, and then came back home. So
wow.
It was kind of hard for me because I was watching all of this unfold. Obviously, at that time while I was overseas was 2020, so COVID, George Floyd happened, all this stuff.
Riots.
We get 4 officers shot in St. Louis. Captain David Dorn was killed. All of this stuff. So I was sitting here watching this in my bunk in Kuwait and was just not a nice person the entire time.
Sure.
Yeah. I had 4 guys underneath me, and they were like always like, "Hey man, like you good?" I'm like, "I'm good. Just leave me alone."
Yeah.
Like I just want to be back there. Especially since we didn't have a job. We didn't have a directive.
Just like chilling.
Right.
Yeah, you're just hanging out, working out.
While all your people and your peers are back here having to deal with what they're dealing with.
Yep.
I could imagine.
Yeah, that was hard. But that was probably the hardest part of that deployment. I always say we got a vacation in the Middle East for what that's worth.
Yeah.
So.
Now, what are some of those things that you learned in the military that you've brought back into everyday life?
Yeah, definitely. So the military taught me a few things. I still, tie my boots the same way, stuff like that. You just pick up those little things and you don't even know you're doing it. My wife's like, why do you tie your boots like that? I wrap it around twice and then just tied it in a knot and shove the rest of the strings into my boot. So she's like, why do you tie your boots like that? Oh,
that's how we do it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, stuff like that. You pick up little things, uniformity stuff. I like things to be,
organized, clean,
yep.
tidy.
Stuff like that. So, and I take that into certain parts of my life, what parts I want. My truck's a mess, but, I like to keep my boots in a row and stuff like that. So it just depends on what types. I've pulled some of that stuff into my life and other things. I'm like, laughs on this. So.
Well, do you think we're raising young men soft now? Do you think there's something that we're missing in like teaching men growing up now?
Yes, definitely. I think that there's a lapse in just all around, I even see, so I actually, after I was shot, I needed, I went and coached soccer at my high school. And I remember like my high school days and playing soccer in college and stuff.
And how old are you?
I am 29 now.
Okay.
So I was probably coaching at about 27, I guess it was a couple years ago. And, I one of these kids would mess up or they'd, drop the F-bomb or something like that. I'd be like, hey, start running. And they'd look at me and they'd be like, what? Because their last coach didn't make them do any of this. And they were like baffled. And I got a call from the athletic director, and he's like, hey, you lost 2 of your kids. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, well, they quit the team. And I'm like, why? He's like, well, I don't know. I called him up. I'm like, hey, why are you quitting? They're like, well, you're mean. I'm like, no, I'm just, like, I'm not going to let you, do all this stuff. And,
Hey, your actions have consequences.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that was something that I guess they hadn't experienced in sports before and stuff like that. And I was like, it was just wild to me.
Oh, yeah.
That kind of stuff.
I think I forgot. We were just talking about this the other day. Somebody was like asking me to do something in a nice way, and I was like, "Oh yeah." And then another person was like, "No, I need you to do it right now." I'm like, responded to that so much better than someone like, I don't know. I guess that's just. I mean, my high school coach for hockey in high school, he was a state trooper. He was a sergeant as a state trooper, and he basically ran our practices like boot camp. Like he was mean, but everybody responded to that. Like everybody like. They wanted to work hard for that. Like, I don't know if he would have been nice if we would have really wanted to put in the effort and work hard. I don't know. Maybe that's just the generation that we had. But, I mean, yeah, because I coach nowadays. And I had to go and ask the parents, like, hey, listen, I'm not going to baby these kids. Like, they fuck up or they do something like, not like they just make an error, but like mental, like I can't stand mental errors and things like that. Like, there's just lack of focus. Like, we're going to be focused every time we step on the field. Yeah. And, or if we make mental errors, like, just know during a game, if we make mental errors, I'm keeping track of that, and we're going to run for that. Yeah. And I had to go to the parents, like, hey, I promise I won't hit your kids, but I'm going to put them through some shit and make them tougher. And every single parent was like, yes, please do that. Please do that. Please do that. And some parents were like, yeah, if you want to hit my kids, go for it.
Yeah, no, I think that it's definitely becoming a lapse. Like, even the military, basic training is like becoming lax. Like they're getting their phones and like, it's just odd stuff. Yeah. Like I didn't see my phone in basic training until like, I think like the last month I was there, and they had us call our parents like, hey, call your parents because you're getting ready to graduate in a week. And I was like, oh, okay. Cool.
And how long was basic?
I think it's 4 months.
Okay.
I think. And it was, at the time it was like the hardest part in my head. I was like, oh man, this is so hard, and it's like, now I'm like, oh, I'll go do it again for fun. It was kind of neat. It was kind of a neat experience. They remove you. Well, back then they would remove you all from your past life and like make you into this new molded soldier, and you'd come out and like be different. Yeah. I don't think that is that way as much now as it was before. Even my time right before, I got discharged from the military, I was still seeing like guys come out, and I'm like, why are you not better than you are? Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing is that, that's kind of scary because those are the people that are fighting to protect our freedoms. And it's like, are they just going to lay down when shit gets tough? Like, that's concerning.
And I think that a lot of this is happening because of not only the culture, but also, they think that, oh, we're not getting as many people, so let's lighten the standards a little bit.
Yeah, which is like the wrong thing to do.
I feel like lightening the standards is also costing you people because they're like, well, I don't want to be in the military. It's a joke,
Right. Or, yeah.
How's your view on masculinity changed with everything that you've been through from what you thought it was at 18 to where you're at now in life?
It's definitely masculinity. I kind of take hand in hand with respect. If a guy's walking around and he's like, F this, F that, blah, 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 screw that guy, whatever. It's not, I don't foresee that as a masculine person, like the respect I feel like coincides. Like if you show someone respect and don't receive it, that's fine. But just know that like you should show respect to people. And I just feel like that's part of what's missing in today's culture and masculinity. I think that there's definitely a respect issue all around, especially in America.
I think that stems from how people are raised, I mean, I think that's where I learned it.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. No, sir. Yes,
Same.
thank you. You know,
Yeah.
like, and that's, I feel like, not as prevalent. Like, you know, it's like when my son says thank you or
Mhm.
something, when you give him something in front of, they're like, wow, he's so
Yeah.
polite. You know, it's like, no, it's just normal. That's
Yeah,
how it
no.
should be.
My kids say yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am, and every time they do, the looks that they get, like, wow. I always get like, hey, your kids are really polite. I'm like, well, yeah, that's how
Yeah.
they should be.
Yep.
That's how everyone should be.
My I have a really good buddy who kind of helped me get through the shooting, and he's like that. He's got 2 kids now, and yes sir, no ma'am, and all of our buddies look at him weird. They're like, why do you like, it's respect.
Yeah.
And
that's great.
he's teaching him, he's a boxer, so he's teaching him to fight and stuff, and they're like, your kid's like, he's like, yeah, my kid will beat you up. He's like, but only if I tell him to.
Right.
So
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, raising kids, man, it's an interesting time.
Yeah.
Right now to
Yeah.
have kids and be raising them, and you got society's view on parenting, and then it's just like, well, fuck, I don't believe in that view on parenting.
Right.
I'm going to do things my own way, and
Yeah.
like what I feel is right. Like,
Yeah.
as long as I feel like I'm teaching them the right morals, ethics, and principles, I think and teaching them values, I think we're gonna be all right.
yeah, I think that I always think about, I always relate the respect and the masculinity and like fathering kids and stuff like that back to, if you guys have ever seen American Sniper,
Mhm.
read the book and everything. At the very beginning, they're sitting at the table, and Chris is a kid at this point, and he, the dad says that he had just got into a fight because his brother was getting picked on. His dad said, "Did you finish it?" And he looks at him and said, "Yeah." Like that kind of stuff, is missing from this world. Like that now is like seen as like, oh, like, why are we teaching our kids to fight? Why? Well, because his brother was getting picked on and he defended him.
Right.
Yeah, my
Right thing to
6-year-old choked out a 14-year-old because the 14-year-old was messing with his younger brother. I was like, fuck yeah. My ex-wife called me and goes, hey, you need to stop teaching these kids jujitsu moves. I'm like, why? Like, because Connor just choked out our neighbor. Like,
Good.
I'm like, well, there must have been a reason for it.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, he's messing with Ollie. So I'm like, well, there you go.
There you go.
Yeah.
I'm glad he's going to stick up for
I
him.
bet he won't mess with his
Yeah.
little brother next
Yeah.
time. You know,
Absolutely.
For sure. So
Yeah,
no,
it makes me think of the you ever seen that Nate Diaz video where you're like, did you ever get kind of what led you into being a MMA fighter? Were you picked on a lot as a kid? And he's like, no, man, I had a big brother. And it's like, that's like the coolest line
Yeah.
ever. Like,
Yeah.
no, man, I had a big brother.
yeah. Well, it's fun
Yeah.
because they both stick up. I just
they're
love how
both
they
pro
both,
MMA fighters,
Right,
like
well,
legends.
yeah, but I just like Ollie sticks up for Connor too. Like my youngest will stick up for my oldest if someone's messing with him. Like, hey, don't talk to my brother that way. Like Ollie's not as, Ollie's thicker and but he's shorter but he's not he's a tough kid.
Right.
He's my fuck around and find out kid. Like, but yeah, he'll come up. He'll if you're messing with his brother, he'll push you. And like, don't talk to my brother that way, or don't mess with my brother. And then Connor will be like, yeah, don't talk to me like that. No, that's
awesome.
great. No, it's what I want, and
Yeah.
that's how we're raising them. And I'm glad my ex-wife and I are on the same page about that.
Yeah.
But she just like, yeah, we need to be careful about the jiu-jitsu stuff. It's like, they're trying to triangle me right now. I'm like, guys, do not triangle your mom.
So, do you think pain is a necessary component for growth in men? Like, if you think like it's how we kind of build a balanced life?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I look at even when I was playing sports in school, I would get, I'd fall down or something like that, and that pain to drive to get back up, or if you were doing conditioning in school, you're breathing hard, you can't breathe, your lungs hurt, right? And driving through it, learning that drive to get through that kind of stuff is definitely imperative. I think that makes, young men into men. And I think I would not be where I'm at now without all of the things in my life, struggling to run at the police academy, struggling to get through basic training, being shot wouldn't make me who I am today without it. So I definitely think that it is an imperative point in the way I am now. Yeah.
Are you and your wife wanting to have kids, or is that something that you guys have? Yeah.
Yeah. We are. I think we're kind of waiting to hit a norm in life right now. We're trying to, move out to the country and do stuff like that. So I think within the next year and a half, 2 years, probably. Yeah.
Now with your podcast, being on this podcast, being on other podcasts,
Mm-hmm.
Future children, they look back on this in 20, 30 years and they're seeing this version of their dad. What is it that you would want them to kind of take away from all the things that you're doing right now with the podcasting and stuff like that?
Yeah, definitely. Rome wasn't built in a day. It took multiple years of my life to get and make me who I am today. So I definitely would want them to know that you can't build the perfect person, overnight. Not that they would ever be perfect, but you can't get to where you're at in life just by waking up one morning and saying, hey, I'm a millionaire now.
Right.
Yeah.
You just don't do that. You have to work for it. You have to put in the sweat, the blood, the tears, to get there.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Colin, this has been awesome having you in here, man. We've
been great.
We've had a great time. We've learned a lot. For you guys out there, check out Colin's podcast. It's called Built Different. But before we get you out of here,
We always like to end the show with one last surprise question. We call it the tombstone game.
Mm-hmm.
All right, here lies Colin. What do you want it to say on your tombstone?
I feel like I gotta keep it cliche. Built different. I feel like that's kind of a motto that's become me, become Nate. So yeah.
yeah, I love it. Perfect. Well, thanks again, and thanks to everybody paying attention at home. If you could click that subscribe button for us, that would help us out a ton. Click that like button as well. Comment what you thought below, and we will see you next time.